Respected elders, educationists, dear teachers, and dear students, welcome. In this class, we are going to see five couplets under the chapter 29, that is, avoiding fraudness, that is, giving up fraud. Chapter 29, avoiding fraud. Come, let us see the five couplets from 281 to 285. Tirukkural, comments and explanations with the new dimension. Five couplets from 281 to 285. Live 114. Dated 27/6/2024. Virtue. Chapter 29. Ascetic virtue. The actions of fraud. The actions of, that is, giving up fraud or not entertaining fraud, not intending to cover others' property. Couplet 281. He who wants not to earn disgrace losing grade should desire to covet others' property by fraud. Again, he who wants not to earn disgrace losing grade should desire to covet others' property by fraud. What is the message of this couplet? That is, the man who desires not to earn disgrace and degradation should not desire to covet the belonging of others. So this is the message. Again, the man who desires not to earn disgrace and degradation should not desire to covet the belongings of others. That is, he who wants not to earn disgrace losing grade should desire to covet others' property by fraud. Explanation. If a man wants to lead a dignified life without earning any dishonor, he should not long to covet even the smallest property of others by fraud. That is, he who loves dignity should never intend to deprive the property of others through fraud. Okay? He who loves dignity should never intend to deprive the belongings of others through fraud. That is, coveting others' property would earn disgrace. This is the message. That is, coveting others' property would earn disgrace. So, what is the outward message? Content. Content means outward message. Fraud should stain dignity. Fraud should stain dignity. That is, fraudulent activities would earn disgrace, or fraudulent deeds would spoil reputation. That is, fraud should stain dignity. What is the core? That is, what is the inner message? Honest heart is the pulse of virtue. Honest heart is the palace of virtue. Fraudulent heart is the hell of Satan. Fraudulent heart is the hell of Satan. That is the outward message. Inward message is core. Honest heart is the palace of virtue. Okay, again, he who wants not to end disgrace, losing great, should desire to covet others' property by fraud. That is, if we want not to earn disgrace and degradation, we should not try to covet the belonging of others. Chapter 282. To think to covet by heart, even of others' property by fraud, is a sin. Again, to think to covet by heart, even of others' property by fraud, is a sin. What is the message? It is to think to deprive, to covet the belonging of others by fraud is a sin. To think to deprive the belonging of others is a sin. That is the thinking of coveting the property of others itself is a sin. We need not we need not necessarily deprive, but the thinking of depriving itself is the greatest sin. That is what world one stresses. To think to deprive the belonging of others is a great sin. We need not necessarily deprive, but the thinking itself, the thinking of coveting others' property is the greatest sin. To think to covet by heart even of others' property by fraud is a sin. Explanation. Even thinking by heart to steal the property of others by fraud is a sin. It is to think to covet others' property by fraudulent means is a sin. To think to covet others' property by fraudulent means is a sin. This is the message. What is the content? That is, what is the outward message? The avarice for others' belongings must spoil reputation. It is the avarice, the desire for others' belongings must ruin our reputation. What is the core? What is the center of the couplet? Not longing for others' belongings would earn reputation. Not longing for others' belongings would earn reputation. This is the core. That is, a desiring for others' property would spoil reputation. But not longing for others' property would earn reputation. Again, to think to covet by heart, even to think to covet by heart, even of others' property by fraud is a sin. That is, even the thinking of coveting others' property by fraud is a sin. Couple 283. The income and outcome of ill-gotten wealth would be equal by health. That is a beautiful couplet. That is the income and outcome of ill-gotten wealth would be equal by health. What is the message? That is, if we covet the wealth of others by fraud, that is, the riches that seems, the riches that seems what we have here, that is the income. That is the amount of riches we steal through covetousness would be equal to the amount of disgrace and degradation we earn. Yes, that is the amount of wealth we gain through fraud. The amount of wealth that we gain through fraud would be equal to the amount of disgrace that we earn because of that stealing, because of that fraud. That's all. The amount of riches we earn by fraud would be equal to the amount of disgrace we earn because of that fraud. Explanation. We ought to know that material wealth alone is not the only wealth. It is only perishable. Human value also is a great wealth. It is imperishable. By riches, by richness, that is by greatness, by richness, human value is much greater than material value. By richness, human value is much greater than material value. The amount of material wealth a man accumulates by evil ways and the amount of reputation he loses because of that would would be equal and parallel. See, this is the message of this couplet. This is the message of this couplet. Couplet, that is the amount of wealth a man accumulates through evil ways would be and the amount of I mean and the amount of loss of reputation and the amount of loss of reputation would always be equal and parallel. That is, ill-gotten material and mental wealth would spoil dignity. That's all. Ill-gotten material and mental wealth would spoil dignity. Then, content, that is outward message. Fraudulence would ruin dignity. Fraudulence would ruin dignity. God, not enjoying covetousness would earn fame millions. Fraudulence would ruin dignity. But not enjoying fraudulence, that is covetousness. Not enjoying fraudulence, that is covetousness, would earn fame millions. That is not enjoying fraudulence would earn millions and millions of fame and name. Again, the income and outcome of all ill-gotten wealth would be equal by health. The income and outcome of ill-gotten wealth would be equal by health. That is the amount of that is the amount of wealth a man gains by fraud would be equal to the amount of reputation he loses. The amount of wealth a man gains through fraud would be equal to the amount of reputation he loses. Both would be equal. The amount of wealth a man gained through fraud would be equal to the amount of dignity who he loses. The loss of dignity and the income of others' property would be equal. The greater the amount you steals from others, then the greater of reputation you will be losing. The greater of amount you covers from others would be equal. I mean, the greater the amount you steals would be equal to the would be the greater the reputation you lose. Then, couple 284, the range of love for stealing would be equal to the range of love of suffering. This is another beautiful couplet. That is, the range of love for stealing would be equal to the range of love of suffering. It is another beautiful couplet. That is, the amount of the amount of love you get by stealing. That is the amount of the amount of delight you get by stealing would be equal to the amount of suffering you face because of that stealing. Okay, then that is the amount of delight you gain by stealing would be equal to the amount of suffering you face because of that stealing. That is the amount of delight and the amount of suffering could be equal to each other. So don't steal. That is the message is the amount of the amount of delight of stealing, the amount of suffering, the amount of suffering because of that stealing would be equal. So don't steal. As the amount of delight and as the amount of delight and the amount of suffering because of stealing are equal. Don't think of stealing. The range of love for stealing would be equal to the range of love of suffering. Explanation. The quantity of love in stealing would always be equal to the quantity of love of sorrow caused by stealing. The quantity of love in stealing would always be equal to the quantity of love of sorrow caused by stealing. Here, love means, desire. That is the delight. Here, love means delight, joy. That is the amount of delight a man gets by stealing and the amount of suffering he gets by that stealing would always be equal. That is what I explained just now. That is The amount of joy and sorrow produced by stealing would be equal. This is the essence of this couplet. That is the amount of joy and sorrow. The amount of joy and sorrow produced by stealing would be equal. Then continues. That is the outward message. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. This is the Newton's third law of motion. This is Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Yes, if you do good, you will get reputation. You will get praise. If you do evil, then you will get, disgrace. Four, center of learning. Not loving stealing would earn sweet love. Right? It is not loving stealing would earn sweet love. It is, if you don't love stealing, if you don't love stealing, then love would love you. If you don't love stealing, then love itself would love you. Again, the range of love for stealing would be equal to the range of love of suffering. That is, the amount of delight a man gets by stealing would be equal to the amount of suffering he faces because of that stealing. That is, the amount of delight would be equal to the amount of suffering caused by stealing. Chapter 285. The desire for kindness finds no place in those who are watching the time to steal the riches of others. Again, Couplet 285. The desire for kindness finds no place in those who are watching the time to steal the riches of others. What is the message of this couplet? That is, mercy and kindness would not live in the heart of the man. Mercy and kindness would not live in the heart of the man who is always desirous of coveting the belongings of others and is waiting to deprive and is waiting for the right time to deprive the belonging of others. This is the this is the meaning of this covenant. That is, mercy and kindness would not live in the mind of the man who is interested in coveting and is waiting for the right time to deprive the belonging of others. So this is the message of this covenant. See the explanation. People who are waiting for the right time to swindle the worth of others won't mind of having kindness and mercy. That is, it is not possible to expect kindness and love from those who are expecting a suitable time to deprive others' belongings. That is, love and mercy. That is, mercy and kindness cannot be expected from from people who are expecting who are waiting for the right time to swindle the belonging of others. That is, that is virtuous kindness. Virtuous kindness cannot be expected from thieves. That is, virtuous kindness cannot be expected from thieves. That is the message. What is the content? That is, what is the upward message? Content. The mind with fraud is the hell of cunningness. The mind with fraud is the hell of cunningness. If so, what is the core? What is the central idea? The mind without fraud is the heaven of goodness. Now, this is the, hidden message. The open message is the mind with fraud is the hell of cunningness. The core, the mind without fraud is the heaven of goodness. Yes, again the couplet. The desire for kindness finds no place in those who are watching the time to steal the riches of others. That is, mercy and kindness would not live in the mind of the man who is interested in coveting and is waiting for the right time to steal the belonging of others. Respected elders, educationists, the teachers and dearest students. So that's so far under the chapter, virtue, under the chapter 29, that is the absence of fraud, that is not enjoying, not having fraud. Five couplets, because see, in all the five couplets, one goes on, advising us, don't enjoy stealing. It is don't have fraud. On no account should you try to covet the belonging of others. It is because the amount of delight you get by steal, by fraud, the amount of delight you get by fraud would be equal to the amount of suffering you face because of that fraud. As the delight and fraud, as the delight and suffering of fraud are equal, don't steal.